Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode, before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed, Season 4, Episode 9, A Page from the Past. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happened within this episode. So, at the start of the episode, after getting Cole from the police station where he was brought in for driving without an ID in Piper's vehicle, um, there is a car accident that they witness, and Paige freezes, unable to help the lady who was in the car, leaving that to Piper and Cole, who rescue her. This leads to the sisters, Piper and Phoebe, finding out about the fact that 8 years previous, Paige's adoptive parents died in a car crash. And after talking to Paige about it, they find out that she's been blaming herself and feeling responsible for that accident and basically having a lot of survivor's guilt over the fact that she survived and they didn't, and not being able to understand why. And so, in an effort to help her, Leo calls in a favor with a malevolent spirit named Clyde, who allows people to go back and relive their past in order to learn something. But because he's a bit disgruntled about being called down, he tells Leo that he needs to be Paige's guide instead of it being Clyde himself, which Leo agrees to, though he does warn Piper and Phoebe that he's not going to be able to be called during this time should they need him, as he's going to be in the past, guiding Paige, which they say is fine. And before Clyde leaves, after Leo and Paige go into the past, two souls escape from Clyde's door into the modern era. And that is where our two plots diverge. So, sticking to Paige, they arrive in the past. Paige is in her past body, and even though she is warned she cannot change the past, she still tries to anyways. She tries to be nicer to her parents, tries to convince her parents that she's not going to stay a screw up forever. She tries to leave class early so that they won't be on the road when the accident happens. So many things, little things, trying to get through and change that past. However, even though they do end up in the car at a different time and they are heading home instead of to a restaurant, the fact is, as Leo says, they were destined to die at that moment. And when they are hit by the truck, the car flips, it goes on fire, they're not able to be saved, but Paige orbs out of the car, which is how she learns that the reason she survived way back then was that magic has always been inside of her, and because she had a greater destiny and it wasn't her destiny to die there, magic saved her, allowing her to orb out of the car, whereas in contrast, the reason she couldn't save her parents even by changing certain elements of the past is because one, it was never her fault, and two, it was always their destiny to die at that time in that way. And she comes to accept that, but she's still upset because she believes her parents will never know the type of person that she managed to grow into and all of the good that she's done since, because as a teenager, she was highly rebellious and highly dysfunctional and highly into the smoking and the alcohol and the vices, skipping classes, talking back, telling her parents they weren't her real parents, even though she didn't believe that, but because she knew it would hurt them, so on and so forth. However, once they do come back, she does accept that it wasn't her fault, but she's still upset. So Leo then says Clyde owes him, and he brings the ghosts of her parents down to see her, where they tell her that essentially they've been watching over her the entire time. They know exactly who she is, what she's done, how she's grown, and they're proud of her, and they love her, and it's a very sweet moment to end the episode on. Going all the way back to the diverging plot, the two souls that escape from the door possess Phoebe and Cole, and they were a pair of thieves who had basically cleared out some jewelry stores before being gunned down, and they say that they have a job to do. and they hit a jewelry store to steal an engagement ring. Then they hit a wedding dress store to steal a wedding dress, and then they're finally caught up to at the chapel after Piper and Daryl have basically had to run around following them, freezing the crime scenes, covering up evidence because, they're possessed and they don't want Cole and Phoebe going to jail. And Daryl did just help Cole with the whole driving incident, so that would look really bad if he then ended up getting got for being a thief. And so they catch up to them in the chapel, but Frankie, who is possessing Cole, does not care about Cole or Piper or Daryl or anybody, and so he basically turns the gun on Daryl. Daryl has to retaliate, and this, of course, leads to the Souls leaving Cole and Phoebe because they can't get married if one of them is no longer. Um, and so Piper takes advantage of that to call Clyde back. Clyde brings Leo and Paige back from the past, while also then capturing Lulu and Frankie, saying that it's a minor slip up and he never promised a safe journey. And then Leo is, of course, able to heal Cole. And then Cole and Phoebe, because they were in there as witnesses to Frankie and Lulu's love and desire to be married, to the point where they're willing to commit crimes to make sure that they can get married. Um, Basically, Phoebe tells Cole to ask her again. Cole asks her to marry him, and this time Phoebe does say yes. So now that we've been reminded about everything that happened in this episode, or at least the most important parts that happened in this episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. And on our mostly objective rank values, starting off, we have our single episode supporting character introductions, and that is Clyde, by extension Frankie and Lulu, worth 1 point, and then Paige's parents worth a second point. Then we have the successful emotional impact, and that I believe to be the ending of the episode when Paige's parents as ghosts are able to come back and tell her that they've always been with her, they're proud of her, so on and so forth. I mentioned it in the summary. That one always gets me a little bit because I think that that is a beautiful moment between parents and child, and that allows her to get her closure, etc. But anyways, the next points are positive 4 points, and that's for the multi-season main character growth, which is, of course, Paige getting over her survivor's guilt, understanding that it was never her fault, that it was their destiny and her destiny to be saved by magic, and the reason she survived was magic saving her because that is what was meant to happen. And then, of course, with the successfully emotionally impactful ending, her also getting that closure of knowing that her parents have always been watching over her and know how she's grown and that she wasn't a screw up and that she did love them and all of those emotionally fraught things. Then the last positive points, we have the main relationship development, which of course is Phoebe finally agreeing to marry Cole after they were possessed by Lulu and Frankie, which Frankie and Lulu do note verbally at multiple points in the episode how excited their the original owners of the bodies are as they're going through to get all of the supplies for the wedding and at the wedding, how, they seem to want to be married as much as they do. And so I guess that was the wake-up call that Phoebe needed in order to say yes to Cole. But there were some negatives. So the first negative is a weak subplot concept. To be honest, I didn't really like the Frankie and Lulu saga. I mean, I know they needed something for for Piper and Phoebe to do while Paige was in the past, but I've never been a fan of that particular plot line. Although I do think it is funny how Piper and Daryl have to kind of follow behind them covering up, and Daryl's at first against it until it could potentially impact his career, and then he's all for covering it up, though he cannot believe he's doing that because he is a cop. But I do think ultimately, like, I just don't really vibe with the whole thief storyline. Um, Not to mention the fact that Frankie and Lulu could probably have just dipped into Phoebe's bank account or whatever joint account there is and bought the stuff. They didn't necessarily have to commit crimes. I mean, that's one of the benefits of possessing a body is you then can use the things that that body owns to achieve your goals. So I also think that it was a bit of a silly plot line that they had to go and be thieves, and commit thievery in order to have this wedding when they could have just, charged Phoebe's account or Cole's account, though, to be honest, both of them are unemployed, so how much money they actually would have, I guess maybe they would have had to be thieves after all. Anyways, that brings us to the second negative, which is the negative messaging or behavior, which is, of course, the thievery taking place, and also, by extension, Daryl having to cover up the crimes. And that brings this episode to a 9 overall, a 9 out of 10 for our mostly objective ranking. However, I do want to honorably mention that normally I would have considered it a main character development, Cole being shot, but because he was shot as Frankie, not as Cole, I'm saying technically it wasn't Cole who was shot, therefore I'm not counting it as a character development. And then Leo healed Cole right away, so it wasn't really a big deal. But I didn't give points for that development because it wasn't Cole who was shot, but Frankie who was shot. Um, so that is my justification for that and why I did not give points, though you might argue that points should have been given. And so that brings our list for season 4 ranking so far to in first place, Charmed Again, Hell Hath No Fury, Enter the Demon, A Night to Remember, A Page from the Past is in 5th place. Then we have Size Matters, Brain Drain, Muse to My Ears, and Black as Coal. Next up, we have the season 4 rankings for the personal list. And I'll be honest with you, this was not my favorite episode ever. I love the emotional impact side of things. I like the duo of Piper and Daryl covering up crime scenes. I do think that the emotional growth and character growth that came from the episode is good. I like that we reached a relationship milestone with Phoebe and Cole, with her accepting the engagement and the marriage that will follow the engagement. So those were some good things, but ultimately I did get a little bit of secondhand embarrassment by Paige constantly trying to change things, constantly breaking character with her old self, and even just the way that every single teenager in this in this series are horrible. It's like, why can't we have an example of a good teenager? Like me, when I was a teenager, I never smoked, I never drank, never did drugs, never gave into peer pressure, never even stayed out late. I was like a model teenager. Studious, good at class, never skipped a class, never rebelled ever. Never had any want or desire to. Why can we not see that kind of teenager? Like every single teenager, every single sister, every single one of them are delinquent teenagers. That's the only type of teenager they decide to show us. And I mean, sure, that shows great character growth. You go from like a horrifyingly evil delinquent to beacon, icon of good. Like, okay, but not every teenager is a rebel. Not every teenager does bad things. Not every teenager flouts parental authority and the law and just moral decency and social decency, etc. Like, there are good teenagers out there. So I do kind of have beef with the fact that every teenager we have seen to date, except maybe one of them. I'm thinking of the nerdy guy who was the seventh son of the seventh son that was able to um, defeat the sorceress with the wand. He was a bit of a nerd, but even he was a bit of a jerk to them at times, though that was more due to his insecurity. But the point is, pretty much every single teenager that we have seen has been terrible, especially the female teenagers, which I personally take exception to because I was not that kind of teenager and I feel like I'm not being represented. But that's beside the point. I'm not taking points for that. I just want to mention that I am shocked and appalled that they don't have a good teenage role model anywhere so far in this series. And then she's going to trying to like convince everybody, oh, she's gonna be good, she's gonna quit drinking, she's gonna quit smoking, and then it turns out she'd already been promising all those things and not following through, so nobody believes her. So that's a bit embarrassing for Paige. And then of course, having to relive your teenage life and then trying to go off script and break the rules, failing anyways. The point is I love the concept and the growth that comes from the plot, but the actual secondhand embarrassment of actually having to follow through teenage self, not great. Then there is, of course, the other side, which is the Frankie Lulu, which I've already said was never my favorite plot. That's why I took points for it being such a weak subplot. I just think like it wasn't valuable. And I feel like if Phoebe and Cole were meant to be, they could have gotten to the marriage eventually. Anyways, like I don't think they needed to be possessed by matrimonially inclined ghosts to decide that's how they're going to get married. In fact, I feel like that almost cheapens it in a way because it's like rather than coming to those decisions on their own, they were only able to get there, or at least Phoebe was only able to get there by being literally possessed by somebody else. So again, I wasn't overly fond of that either. And that's why ultimately I decided to give it a 5. And honestly, I was also considering giving it lower, but I do think that there are enough positives and enough reasons and the milestones to bring it up to a 5 out of 10. Which brings the list to in first, Hell Hath No Fury, Charmed Again, A Night to Remember, Size Matters, Muse to My Ears. This episode is in 6th place, A Page from the Past, Brain Drain, Enter the Demon, and then Black as Coal is in last place. Bringing us now to the series ranking so far, and on our mostly objective ranking, Season 3 is in first place, followed by Season 2 and Season 1. Season 4 so far has a score of 75 out of a possible 210. Meanwhile, on the personal ranking side, Season 3 came in first place, Season 1 second, Season 2 is currently in third, and Season 4 has a score of 56 out of a possible 210. But with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 4, Episode 9, A Page from the Past. Like and subscribe if you would like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.